Hello, everyone. My name is Pamela Campagna, and I am the chairperson of the marketing committee of CMC-Global Institute. And today I have with me one of my colleagues, Youssef Khalil, who is going to talk to us about franchising. So before we get started, Youssef, perhaps you could give us a little bit of information about your professional background and also your role in the CMC Global Institute.
Thank you, Pamela, for inviting me to this session. My name is Youssef Khalil, and I'm a former partner of Ernst & Young and PricewaterhouseCoopers in the MENA region, with over 20 years of experience in consulting services, serving several clients in the Middle East, including private and public sector organizations. As a partner in two of the Big Four, I had to take this kind of professional qualifications relevant to the field of the Big Four companies, such as CPA and that kind of things. And recently, also, I'm proud to be a member and a certified member of the ICMCI, the Global Institute, and I'm a certified management consultant as well right now. So this is basically the professional background about myself.
Great, thank you very much. And I understand that a good amount of your experience in the consulting field has been in the area of franchising, which you're going to talk to us about today. So perhaps I can invite you to share your slides and talk to us about franchising.
Sure. I will be sharing a few slides. So I would just ask you to allow me to share my slides if possible.
Okay.
Yeah. So here, if we, I will be talking from these slides, and at certain point of time, I will move to certain websites as well. So just to give the references to where we collected this information, as well as to give a more clearer infographics about what we're going to talk about. So in franchising, basically, we hope to cover today a number of topics, starting with background and history of franchising. Then we'll give examples about largest franchise chains so the audience can understand what we mean by franchising. We'll talk about fees and contract arrangement between franchisor and franchisee so people can feel and touch the cost of franchising. Also, we'll discuss the rationale and the risk shift in franchising industry, advantages and disadvantages of franchising, regulations, what countries are currently regulating the franchising industries. And also we'll touch upon lightly about latest trends in franchising, such as social franchises, third-party logistics franchising, event franchising, home-based franchising. So I hope by covering these topics, we'll have a brief introduction to the franchising industry. Then I will be more than happy in the future to give more detailed information. So moving on, you can see from this slide that a franchise is about three things. It's about a brand. So the franchisee's business is substantially associated with the franchisor brand. And brand means a lot of things, not only the logo and the name. Brand means a know-how, means experience, means operating model, means training. So it is about a know-how in certain industry, in certain product manufacturing or product sales, or a service to be provided under certain standards and quality. The second characteristics of franchising is the franchisor exercises control or provides significant assistance to the franchisee in how it uses the franchisor brand to conduct business. So it's a matter of support rather than a control. So the franchisor doesn't really manage the business on behalf of the franchisee, but provide support and training and know-how. And finally, the franchisor receives a fee from the franchisee, and this fee could be an initial fee, and it could be a continuing fee in terms of royalties as a percentage of revenues. It could be both, depending on the model of the franchising itself. And just to give a feel about what are this kind of business. So everyone sees the Subways, 7-Eleven, McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, Pizza Hut, and so on and so forth. And this is basically a few of the top ranked franchising business in the world. And this ranking is done by the franchisedirect.com, which is one of the leading organizations in this business. And the criteria could be based on system size, number of units, company sales revenue, number of years in franchising, stability and growth, support and perspective, and the current franchisees, environmental policies, corporate citizenship. Why is it important? Because it is a source of GDP as well. It's because franchising is, in simple terms, is an export. When you franchise your business to outside your country, then you are selling your brand, then you are receiving revenue out of this sales. So you are exporting your brand and your expertise and your know-how. So this is why it's important to the national economy. In terms of the current situation and history, for example, now the number of franchise establishments in the US is about 750,000. Number of people employed by franchise business is 8.4 million. And total economic output of franchise establishments in the US is about 787 billion US dollar. This is how big is this business. In terms of history, this is an infographic designed by or provided by the Franchise Direct organization. And here I will try to shift to the website of the Franchise Direct. So in order to be able to share the website itself. So here, so I will share, for example, here
And you may need to reshare, Youssef.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
I'm just looking for the website here. Yes, it's here now. So can you see this website now, Franchise Direct?
Yes.
Okay, so you can see this nice infographic that has been developed by the franchisedirect.com. You can see here the franchise started very early in the Middle Ages, where the business model of franchising started in the Middle Ages. Local governments granted licenses to high church officials and other important people to maintain order and assess taxes. So this is kind of governmental franchising. And in the colonial period, this extended into hold markets, run local fairs, hold fairs, and even hunting on the land and on his own land itself. And in the 1840s, there was a beer brewer in Germany named Spaten, and this brewer granted rights to local taverns to sell their beer. So this is basically one of the early business franchising in history. And I think all of us knows about this sewing machine, the Singer, and this was one of the very famous franchising, where it was granted the rights to sell the product in different markets. The turn of the century, then the automobile manufacturers also needed a way to distribute automobiles. So one of those new distribution methods was automobile dealership in 1896, and then followed by famous brands of automobiles in the early 90s. Then at the beginning of the 1960s, we started to see this famous food chain or fast food chains like McDonald's and expands and over the US, and then after that over the world. So this is basically the history in a very brief. And if you look at the US, which you have given some numbers, see how important is the franchising. So one in 7 businesses is franchised. An estimated 3,383 franchisors operate in the US itself. 1 to 2 new franchise brands each day. An average of 300 new brands start franchising each year. And so on and so forth. You can see that 50% local brand, 34 regional brands. So, and this is why the franchising is really very important and very active in our local and international economy. So I will be back to the slides again. And basically, this is just a write-up about what I have just mentioned in history of the franchising. And moving on to the franchise agreement rights and obligations. The franchise agreement is a license that establishes the rights and obligations between the two parties, the franchisor and the franchisee. And the agreement also needs to be flexible as well, enough to allow franchisor to make contractual modifications that reflect the decisions in response to franchisees' specific needs. However, there are no changes to the main fact of the relationship, which is the independence of the franchisee ability and rights to manage his or her own business under the brand rights given by the franchisor. I would like to skip this part to go to the regulations part. Before the regulations, just to give you a summary of the agreement between the two parts. Basically, the franchise agreement needs to deal with some basic elements, including but not limited to overview of the relationship, duration of the agreement, assigned territory, initial and the continuing fees, site selection and development, initial and ongoing training and support, use of IPs, the intellectual property of the franchisor, the advertising, because some advertising will be central across the world by the franchisor, and some advertising will be specific to each franchisee. Insurance requirements also to be included in the agreement. Record keeping and right to audit is already a part of the agreement. In terms of rational and risk shift, basically would like to talk about 3 things: the reputational damage, we're talking about a brand, then this brand is associated with the name, and this name could be a family name, could be a business name, and of course, the reputation of this name is very important to the franchisor, and this is why the franchising relationship is associated with the reputational damage risk, and this needs to be taken very carefully. And this is to be mitigated by the process and the right selection of the franchisee selected to be given the right to use this brand. Joint employer liability, because as we mentioned, the franchisee will have the full right to manage the business. So, but in the same time, they belong to a bigger brand. So there is some sort of connection as in terms of employer liability. So the franchisor wanted to make sure that they will not be liable for any misconduct by the franchisee being the employer of certain people. And basically, the third point is the financial due diligence and the further the compliance issues as well, which we'll talk about it as we go. So here is the, yes, I'm trying to move here, yes. In terms of the reputational damage, as I mentioned, the franchisees are investing in a business model, but they are also investing in reputation. Likewise, franchisors are depending on the franchisee to maintain that reputation. When one party does something that damages this reputation, both parties can suffer. So this needs to be taken very carefully and needs to be dealt carefully. If we go to the second, the joint employer liability, there are a lot of regulations to manage this relationship, and as we will talk later on, there are several countries regulated the franchising business, and this needs to be complied with. And in terms of the compliance with under the Federal Trade Commission's franchise role, franchisor must provide a franchise disclosure document. Sorry, I said it financial due diligence, it's franchise disclosure document to potential franchisee before a contract is signed. This document contains detailed information about the franchise, including its litigation history, franchise performance, advertising requirements, and training requirements. This document is important for both parties, and the franchisor must provide all the required information. That information must be accurate and complete, and this is basically form the body of the agreement between the franchisor and the franchisee. In terms of advantage and disadvantage of the franchising expansion, when we talk about advantages, expansion can be faster because franchisees provide the labor and their sales provide the growth. And also franchisees are responsible for their company's success, so they are more motivated. Franchisees may be more talented at growing the business and turning a profit than employees would be. So you can imagine that you are self-employed, you have your own business, or you are employed and by an employer for a salary and certain number of hours of working, and all the motive is the end of the week or the end of the month's paycheck. So here, no, you own the business, this is your business, and you are motivated to grow this business and make as much as you can out of it. So the motive here is very important as an advantage. The franchisor puts relatively little money into new locations, as this comes from the franchisee. Successful locations can return high royalties as well. This is an advantage to the franchisor. Consistent operations across the business generally means improved efficiency and higher quality levels. Franchisees should be fully committed due to the investment they put in. Because as we mentioned that the franchisor doesn't really invest money, too much money in this relationship. So the investment basically is coming from the franchisee side, and this is why the franchisee should be fully committed to run this business. In terms of disadvantages, franchisees cannot be managed as closely as employees, and they may have different goals to the franchisor because the relationship is based on the agreement, and the franchisee has the full right to manage the business. And as long as they are complying with the articles and with the conditions of business and the agreement, they should be fine. So there is no control in our relationship of employer-employee relationship between franchisor and franchisee. Franchise recruitment can be slower and less efficient than employee recruitment because naturally you can put an ad asking for employees, you can receive thousands of applicants, you screen them, you shortlist them, you interview them, you select whoever you like, and you see a fit for the job. But in a franchising relationship, it's much more complicated than that because you need to choose the right person in the right market, in the right time, with the right commitment, with the right money and investment. So all of these factors together are not easy to come together in the same time. So sometimes you find the right person, but you don't find the full-time committed person. And sometimes this person doesn't have enough money to invest in this business. So you need to search very carefully and find for your business. And this is why it could be less efficient than employment. Franchisors earn royalties from sales. Franchisees earn money from profit. Achieving growth in both is not always possible, potentially causing conflict. So it's very clear that the franchisor wants the royalty, then the revenue should be high. And could be possible, but also at the beginning, as a startup, the expenses also are very high. So the franchisor gets the benefit in terms of royalties, but the franchisee in the first couple of years may make losses, or with the minimum make losses or little profits. And this is what could cause conflict. So the win-win relationship should be established carefully between the two parties. Franchisees don't always work together like employees might, thus losing any potential collective benefits. So franchisees, they don't have anything, they don't have pension funds or guarantees for future. So they work very hard, but depending on the circumstances of the business and the economic cycle, so it's very tough for them, very challenging situation for franchisees. The upfront investment, as I mentioned, the time and money required can be huge. A pilot operation may need to be tested as well. Selection on wrong franchisee can ruin the reputation of the whole brand of the franchisor. Sharing confidential information with franchisee is risky if they are not fully committed to the business. So I hope by summarizing the advantages and disadvantages of the franchising, and this is basically from a franchisor perspective, and it could be easily understood also from franchisee perspective as well. Obligations, we touched upon these obligations as we went through the previous sections. So I will skip through this. Then we'll give a brief about what countries that they have really invested and regulated this business. And they will say 14 countries. This is basically more than that's about 36 countries because this includes the European Union. But because the European only 6 out of 28 has officially regulated the franchising. So these countries like Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, Canada, China, India, Kazakhstan, Europe, and United States, these basically are the countries that they have regulated the franchising in a formal regulation that can guide the franchisor and the franchisee in managing the relationship between them. The rest of the world, it takes this kind of regulation as a benchmark, as a best practice, so they can benefit from this practice as well. Now we'll talk about a few recent topics like the social franchise. And social franchise enterprises' objective is to achieve development goals by creating self-sustainable activities by providing services and goods in unserved areas. So basically, they would like to help the underdeveloped nations and markets by giving them ways of means of living, standards of living, and guidance and support. So like I'm franchising a social concept rather than franchising a business. And this could be also extended to a business if this business intention is the corporate social responsibility and helping societies as well. So social franchising also refers to a technique used by governments and the aid donors to provide essential clinical health services in the developing world and underdeveloped countries. In terms of 3P franchising or third-party logistics, this is a very growing trend right now in the market globally. And this is basically is the middleman between the producer and the consumer. Instead of a producer investing in delivery, time management, shipping, packing, logistics, timetables, distribution, signatures, warehousing. So this kind of middleman business where people, they put money to invest in warehouses, to invest in delivery fleet, in time management, in shipping, so they take the products of the producers and they ship it, they pack it and ship it, and sometimes store it, then ship it to the end user. And this end user could be an individual, could be also business. So it's applicable to B2B, business to business, and also business to consumers. And also the event franchising is the duplication of a public event. Let's say the ICMCI or the Global Institute is sponsoring a number of events, and someone in a different country wants to replicate these events, could be franchised by the ICMCI to other organizations to do that. And the clear example of this is the World Economic Forum, the Davos Forum, and recently also the World Social Forum has launched many national events as well. So basically a group of people or organizations, they invest in standardizing certain event and making sure that this event is in a way managed very well and has everything to do to succeed. And by conducting this event, by succeeding this event, then other people or other nations or other areas or other markets might be interested to have the same forum or the same event there in their marketplace. So instead of reinventing the wheel and creating the same event again from the beginning, from scratch, they just take the same event and they run it, they duplicate it under the supervision of the parent organization. And of course, this could be also for a fee or for franchising royalties. And finally, the home-based franchising is the franchising or duplication of another firm's successful home-based business. So let's say a business is very successful in the US and someone was studying or visiting the US and they saw this business doing very well. Then basically this person will go to this company and say, hi guys, I want to do, is there any possibility to take this business to my they can see of home-based businesses now are existing across the world. Examples are the Mac and the Cheesecake Factory and some other companies and brands as well. I hope by doing this, I have given a brief introduction to franchising. And sorry for the fast pace, and hopefully in the future we'll have more chances to focus on certain areas of franchising and give more details about them. Thank you very much.
So Youssef, thank you very much for your comprehensive overview of franchising. That was fascinating. I guess I have one question for you, which is what is the role of a management consultant when you think about franchising? What might be the role of a management consultant along that process?
Yeah, it's very important role here because the franchisor has spent a lot of years, a lot of time developing this business. And we mentioned that one of the disadvantage is selecting the right franchisee is a very critical task for the franchisor. And maybe it's not their talent to choose the right franchisee. So a management consultant can be used to source the right franchisee to a certain franchisor. This is one of the benefits. The other role that the management consultant can play here is the fundraising or financing arrangement, because also this business requires seed capital, requires initial capital. So also the fundraising by a management consultant could be arranged. In addition to the traditional consulting services like strategizing the business, preparing a business plan for the new franchisees, the restructuring of the structuring or restructuring of the organization to be more efficient and more effective, recruitment services to the right people to the organizations. All business consulting could be applicable as well, but in particular, selecting the right franchisee, fundraising, and preparing the strategy and the business plan for the franchising business is the three top services that the management consultant can provide and can contribute to this business.
So it sounds as though there's a role to play working with the franchisor and also working with potential franchisees.
Definitely, yes. Can support both parts. Yeah.
Okay, and especially a certified management consultant, right?
For sure, 100%.
Yes, great. Well, thank you again. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us and look forward to our next interview in the CMC Global Institute Consultants Corner. Thank you.
Thank you very much.